Hello and welcome everyone to the Player Prop Happy Hour Conference Championship Edition. I'm your host, as always, Josh Larky, joined with me, as always, by my co-host, the Associate Director of Fantasy and Betting, Ryan Reynolds, and by our new recurring guest, our data scientist, Ahaan Rungta. Gentlemen, let's do it. It's our second to last show of the season. We will each be bringing two player prop bets and one long shot to the table. We will discuss the bet, the sports book that has the best odds, and why we are taking that line. Ryan, let's start with that Ravens-Chiefs game.
First, shout out to all the sports books out there. You made your lines efficient within like 12 hours this week. Very hard to find plays that I actually liked. First up, Lamar Jackson over 210.5 passing yards, minus 115 on DraftKings. Jackson has faced Steve Spagnuolo's Chiefs defense 3 times now, but not in either of the last 2 seasons. He struggled in the air in each of those matchups while breaching 80 yards rushing in 2 of them. Chiefs defense has done a good job limiting premium rushing quarterbacks like Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen over the last 2 years. Lamar is a different tier as a runner from any quarterback in history aside from Michael Vick. That said, I think we can reasonably expect Spagnuolo's biggest concern is Lamar Jackson's ability as a runner. Probably going to take his chances with his quality secondary. Jackson has gone over this number in 8 of his last 13 games. Contest has some shootout potential with Patrick Mahomes on the other side. I think Jackson gets this over 210.5 passing yards.
That is Ryan Reynolds, NFL on Twitter. Check out his power rankings around the33team.com. You can see how he ranks all 4 teams, and you can see if it's Ravens or Niners at number 1. His expert picks and predictions for every game. You want to see his score predictions? That's also on the33team.com. Ahaan, your first prop of the day.
Staying in that game, but going to the other side, Justin Watson over 13.5 receiving yards. Right now, your best price, minus 120 on BetMGM. If you saw our player prop article that came out earlier, this was 13.5, 14.5 pretty much everywhere. Now it's starting to get moved to 16.5 in some spots, so go get it before it moves even more everywhere. The vertical threat that is Justin Watson, I mean, we know what he can do. He will sometimes win a route downfield and catch a football because when he is open, Patrick Mahomes will find him. That's more than most of this team can do. We have Travis Kelce, we have Rashee Rice, and we know that Baltimore is notorious for bracketing top options. And in this case, they have a very good coverage team, obviously, and a deep coverage team. Travis Kelce and Rashee Rice will have to contend with that. You look at what Watson has done. He's coming off a game where he had 0 receiving yards, but it was a bit of an anomaly of a game. Not only was that game pretty run heavy for the Kansas City Chiefs, Mahomes just found Kelce over and over and over again, and the Bills never really adjusted. Mahomes' attempt line, this game is set to 36.5, and you know I like using my attempts lines to cap volume. Watson has cleared this 13.5-yard line in 10 of 13 games this season, where Mahomes has attempted more than 30 passes. And this weekend, Kansas City just has to make sure that Watson is involved out of necessity, because Kadarius Toney is questionable, but I mean, feeding him is also questionable, even if he plays. You'll probably touch on this, Josh, but Mecole Hardman is there on the team, but he should probably not get any more touches, especially after what happened last week. So, Justin Watson, he's probably able to get this on 1 catch. His receptions line is at 1.5, and you can kind of get the same price for over 1.5 receptions or over 13.5 receiving yards, which is why I prefer the receiving yards, because he can get this on 1 catch, being number 3 in the NFL among all wide receivers in ADOT. Mahomes, even if it's a little rainy, doesn't really affect him. So Justin Watson over 13.5 receiving yards, minus 120 BetMGM.
Thanks, Ahaan. Ahaan Rungta on Twitter. Ryan, Ahaan, and I have an article out on the 33rd team, our best bets for these games. So if you want these props that we're discussing on the show, plus a few more, make sure to check that out. Earlier on in that article, I gave out a Mecole Hardman under for receiving yards. Turns out when you fumble on both your touches, that's not good. He is now off the board on every single sports book. So I assume he's either not going to play or he'll show up for a couple snaps somewhere and not get a touch, which would mean that the bet would still hit. My first of the day, I'm going to piggyback off of Ryan's Lamar Jackson over. I'm going to take Mark Andrews over 35.5 receiving yards, minus 114 on DraftKings. He had at least 35 yards in all 9 full games this year. The one game that he didn't, where it wasn't a full game, He still caught 2 passes for 23 yards on just 7 snaps in the game where he severely sprained his ankle on the infamous, what are we calling it? The hip drop tackle. He was a full practice participant last week, and out of precaution, maybe out of disrespect to the Texans, they chose to hold him out. I'm expecting him to be very healthy and have a decent role this week with his second straight full practice participation. If we go back even further and you want a bigger sample size, 2021 through 2022, he was also over this number in 26 of 32 games. That's 81%. No Isaiah Likely receiving yards props are posted on the sports books right now. I'm assuming that means Andrews is going to get most of the receiving work at tight end. And if we look at some of the target competition, the Ravens talked about how they were saving OBJ for the playoffs. And then the veteran ran under 10 routes, had 1 target, caught it for 12 yards last week. I'm not quite sure what's going on there, but it looks to me like it's going to be Andrews, Zay Flowers, Bateman. It's probably going to be pretty condensed there. And 35.5 is a pretty low number. Ryan, I'm going to kick it back to you.
I go back to the well on David Montgomery, under 46.5 rushing yards, minus 114 on FanDuel. Worse line this week than last week against a tougher opponent, but the premise is the same. San Francisco gave up the second fewest rushing yards to running backs this season. 49ers front is their strength, both on their defensive line and at linebacker. Like last week, I like Gibbs' matchup more than Montgomery's. Center Frank Ragnow is also banged up, playing with 2 lower extremity sprains. Lions could be forced to play from behind in this contest too. All of this is pointing towards Dave Montgomery not seeing a major workload here. This line's 43.5 yards at other sports books. So you can get it at a slight value here too. I like Dave Montgomery under 46.5 rushing yards on FanDuel.
We might have a parlay based off of that later in the show. But before Ahaan gives his second play, I'd be remiss not to mention our sponsor, Better, BETR, Better Picks, the startup co-founded by celebrity, boxer, entertainer, marketing genius, Jake Paul. Better Picks, promo code 33rd team. No spaces, 8 characters, 33rd team. You might be like, Josh, I've done Picks apps before. Why this one? Well, quite simply, we don't even care that the interface is just better than almost all their competitors, if not all their competitors. We just want free money. And you get that with Better when you use the promo code 33rd team. You get a 100% deposit match up to $500. You put in $100, you get $200 in your account. You put in up to $500, you would then get $1,000 in your account. That is 5 times the industry standard for the maximum deposit bonus on these fantasy picks apps. Last week, Ryan, Jordan, and I hit a 9X. We had a $50 entry fee. We turned it into $450 in that Buccaneers-Lions game. We took some player receiving and passing mores on their platform. And we're going to have an article dropping tomorrow with Better Pick slips for both games from Ryan, Jordan, Vanek, and I. Stay on the lookout for that. Let's try and hit another large one this week. Ultimately, out of all of our picks, about 70% hit last week. That, I think, is a pretty great ratio. We'll see if we can do another 9X this next week. Better Picks, promo code 33rd team. Ahaan, your second bet of the day.
I'm going to the second game on the slate, the Sunday night game, and I'm going to the 49ers. Arguably, some would still say, arguably, their best player, and I'm going with something that I haven't touched on all season long. I haven't touched this market, and there's a reason why. It's because there's so much variance when it comes to the first half touchdown market. It's a reason why I don't play many first touchdowns. But who doesn't have a lot of variance is Christian McCaffrey. You can get Christian McCaffrey first half touchdown at minus 105 on FanDuel, and this is just a classic case of don't overthink it. The Lions have a tough run defense, and they haven't allowed a lot of RB touchdowns all season long, which is why we're getting a discount. But Christian McCaffrey should not be getting this much of a discount. The 49ers were sloppy on offense last week, but I am about as confident as anyone could possibly be. These are probably ominous last words, but the 49ers are winning this game, and they might actually blow out the Lions. And not because the Lions' offense isn't great. It's because the 49ers' offense is going to bounce back against this horrific Detroit Lions defense. Detroit ranks number 21 in EPA per play allowed. San Francisco should not have issues. They had a few last week against a hot Green Bay defense, and it was rainy. They still managed a few touchdowns and won that game. So I'm not too worried about Brock Purdy not looking great for 3/4 of that game. Whether or not Deebo Samuel plays, McCaffrey is the best running back in the NFL for opportunity purposes. We already know the talent, the system, etc. Among all running backs, he ranks number 13 in yards created, number 1 in breakaway runs, number 1 in evaded tackles, number 13 in juke rate, number 5 in true yards per carry. Also, he's elite through the air. He was number 1 in route participation, number 7 in yards per reception, and number 1 in target share. He's also number 1 in red zone touches, and he's going to continue to be the first option on this team anywhere near scoring territory. I know Brandon Ayuk's going to have a walking mismatch all night long, but once they get to the red zone, the number 1 option is Christian McCaffrey. As long as he has 2 functioning legs, they will use him. McCaffrey, he's essentially matchup proof, and San Francisco hit their Vegas team total in the first half is 14.5. So books agree with me that their offense should be just fine. McCaffrey has a first half touchdown in 12 of 17 games this season, and 7 of 9 where San Francisco scored at least 14 pre-halftime. So this simply, I was expecting this to be like minus 150, as it normally is, as it normally has been throughout the season. But we're getting the Detroit run defense discount, which I will buy low on. Christian McCaffrey, first half touchdown, minus 105, FanDuel.
I like that, Ahaan. I'm just going to piggyback on that. We're just going to target this Lions defense, particularly in the secondary. I think pretty much whoever suits up for the 49ers in the receiving game, whether it's just Ayuk and Kittle and then Juwan Jennings, whether Deebo plays, whoever it is should be able to win against this pass defense. So why not just go with the guy at the helm, Brock Purdy? I'm going to take him over 272.5 passing yards, minus 114 on FanDuel. Sunday night in our free 33rd team Discord. You can see it linked in my Twitter. You can see it linked on the 33rd FB Fantasy and Betting Twitter account. It's linked all over our articles on the site. Our free Discord, I gave out 257.5 passing yards. That is what it opened at on FanDuel on Sunday night. It is not 257.5. It's now 272.5 on FanDuel. We're still going to take the over, and you can at least have a little solace knowing it's already 275.5 on DraftKings. So we're getting a quote-unquote discount, even though it has risen 15. Can't do math on air. 15 yards over the past few days. If we look at the past 5 quarterbacks against the Lions, week 16, Nick Mullins had 411 yards. Week 17, Dak Prescott had 345 yards. Week 18, Mullins again, 296 yards. Wild card round, Stafford, 367 yards. Divisional round, Mayfield, 349 yards. That is at least 345 passing yards and 5 straight games allowed to quarterbacks. We have 2 Nick Mullins games in there. We have a Baker Mayfield game in there. I would say that Brock Purdy is somewhere below Dak and Stafford and somewhere above Nick Mullins and Baker Mayfield. So I'm feeling pretty good about this one, even at this increased price. The implied team total is 29 points for the Niners. That's one of the highest that any team has had all season. This offense should hum. Brock Purdy is the guy at the center. And as Ahaan mentioned, the Lions do have a pretty good run defense. Not saying that can actually stop the Niners, but I think it is in their best interest to simply have a pass-heavier game plan. Brock Purdy over 272.5 passing yards, minus 114 on FanDuel. Before we get to our long shots, one quick reminder again, we are sponsored by Better Picks, BETR. Download the app. New users get a 100% deposit match up to $500. Promo code 33rd team, just one word, 33rd team. We hit a 9X last week with our Better Pick slips. Ryan, Jordan Vanek, and I will be putting out an article tomorrow on the 33rdteam.com, free to read, with more entry slips for you to peruse and potentially play as well in the fantasy picks markets. Better Picks, promo code 33rd team. Ryan, it's time for me to catch my breath, sip on some water for this happy hour occasion. What is your long shot for conference championships?
It's championship week. There's only 2 games. Maybe you want to have a little fun, maybe do something a little aggressive here. So for me, I'm going to do Jamison Williams all yards over 50 and pair it with an anytime touchdown to get plus 1,000 odds on DraftKings. You can beat San Francisco on the top, especially on the perimeter, if you have time. Lions have a premium offensive line. If anyone's going to mitigate the 49ers pass rush, it's them. Jared Goff is also a pressure-sensitive quarterback, so there's a little volatility here with that. But again, Lions' offensive line is one of the best in the league. I really like, to harken back to one of our former co-hosts, Ben Wolby's bread and butters. I also like Jamison Williams over 60.5 longest receptions line. I think you might see that on some of our better pick entries coming tomorrow. But for this one, If you want to make things interesting, pairing Williams with this alt line, touchdown on top of it. You can even go a little bit higher on the alt line if you like. And if you really want to let your hair down, like I tend to do, as always, gentlemen, you can pair Jameson Williams over 50 receiving yards, anytime touchdown, and then take his under 2.5 receptions to get plus 6,500 on DraftKings. You want to be aggressive, have a little fun, let that one rip.
Folks, that is Ryan Reynolds NFL on Twitter. Throw $25 on that. Thank us later. Tell the wife and kids you're headed to Bali. And you know what? It's what we say, fair value might be 1 in 40 games, 1 in 30 games this happens instead of 1 in 65. That sounds pretty good to me. Ahaan, what's your long shot for the day?
I'm staying in that game, and I'm staying with the kind of matchup that Ryan touched on. It's a perfect segue because the 49ers' one weakness is their secondary, right? One, Charvarius Ward's been inconsistent this season. Two, their depth in the secondary just not great. Living proof of that last game, Bo Melton caught a bomb of a touchdown. And this is nothing new, right? So if you look at, if you read our article, I dropped a Lions prop in this game that I didn't cover in this game. So go read the article. There's another receiver on the Lions that nobody has mentioned on the show so far. And it's Josh Reynolds. And Josh Reynolds is going to draw some good matchups against some weaker defensive backs in the San Francisco secondary. I explained more of that in the article. Here are some receivers that have caught some bombs recently, actually since the 49ers came off their bye in Week 10. Raheem Jarrett, Romeo Doubs twice, Jackson Smith and Jigba out of the slot, Curtis Samuel out of the slot, and then Bo Melton last week. So the 49ers are very capable of giving up some big plays, and they are getting healthier on defense, and that should only hurt guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta. So those guys will get the best of the 49ers have on defense. Give me Josh Reynolds to lead the game in receiving at plus 2,200 on DraftKings. This market just came out on DraftKings. It's not there on other books yet. They're scared because Josh Reynolds is about to lead the game in receiving with 90 receiving yards. A little more on why I'm playing it this way instead of just laddering Josh Reynolds. Number one, I'm not confident that Josh Reynolds is going to go off. You shouldn't be, right? I don't want to play the baseline. I don't want to try to guess which Lions guys actually catch the deep balls because Goff can be inconsistent, especially when under pressure. That's why I like Ryan's approach of going after the long shot on Jameson Williams, but I'm going after this approach on Josh Reynolds. Josh Reynolds has led the Lions in receiving 3 times this season already. Sam Laporta hasn't done that. And twice it was with Amon-Ra and Sam Laporta in the lineup. So he's done it twice already this season. You're getting an implied probability of 4.3%. That's too little. Plus 2,200, Josh Reynolds to lead the game in receiving in a game where, I hope the Lions fans didn't get their feelings hurt when I said they're going to lose this game. But here you go. I've taken a prop because I think you guys will be pass heavy, and you'll have to throw maybe 40 times.
Thank you, Ahaan. I'm going to keep this trend going. We don't necessarily coordinate with our long shots pre-show. We have the JMO line. We've got the Josh Reynolds line. I have a parlay on the Lions as well. We're going to take David Montgomery's rush yards under plus his anytime touchdown, parlayed on FanDuel at plus 550. You might be like, Josh, why do we think Montgomery's not going to run for a lot of yards but score a touchdown? Simply because that is what his role has been. All season, he's been the premier goal line back for this offense. He's had 6 goal line carries the past 2 games for the playoffs. 4 in one, 2 in the other. Yet, he only had 10 and 14 carries in those 2 games. He's probably going to be inefficient versus the Niners, as Ryan mentioned. Yet the team total for the Lions is still a pretty hefty 22 points. That might be about 3 touchdowns. Montgomery scored in 4 of his past 5 games, 12 of 16 overall. I think he can get 9, 10, 11, 12 carries here for 35 to 40 yards and score a touchdown when they get near the goal line. David Montgomery, rush yards under, anytime touchdown, parlay him at plus 550 on FanDuel. I think that hits a little bit more than once every 6.5 games like those odds imply. Folks, that is the Player Prop Happy Hour for the conference championship games. From myself, Josh Larky, from Ryan Reynolds, from Ahaan Rungta, from the 33rd team, from Better Picks promo code 33rd team. Thank you, everyone.